Welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. If you enjoy our content, please like or subscribe.
Hi, welcome to Ellis Talker Show. I'm continuing my candidate series. Make sure you check out K&H Construction in Waxahachie. If you need anything done at your house, let them know DV LeBron sent you. But my very special guest is someone who's been on the show before, Mr. Matt Authier. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, DV. I always appreciate you having me on and look forward to it every time.
Thank you, my friend. I, saw that you had decided to run for office, and a big office, HD10. And I was like, man, this guy likes punishment, because that's just these politics are rough. And I tell every candidate, thank you for wanting to serve your community, because this rough and tumble thing that politics can get really nasty. But anyway, there's some people who may not know who you are. So Can you go ahead and tell them, who is Matt Authier?
I'll do it. I'll be glad to. And yeah, DV, it's unfortunate things get nasty, but I've just had that put on my heart for a long time to serve my community. And I feel like this is the right time and the right role. My wife and I grew up in Corsicana, just south of here. We moved here 16 years ago in 2010. We both graduated from Texas A&M. I've dated my wife since 8th grade. She's my high school sweetheart, middle school sweetheart. We dated for about 10 or 11 years, graduated A&M, got married that summer. Lived in Dallas for a year. We tried the high-rise apartment, and just too much concrete for us. We had 2 dogs, and we visited Waxahachie one time. We had lunch on the square in the shadow of the courthouse and just fell in love with Waxahachie and Ellis County, and we decided to move here immediately. Kate, my wife's been in the school system ever since, so this will be her 16th year in the school district. She's currently a principal at one of the K through 5 campuses here in Waxahachie. I've served on the school board in the past. It's been almost a decade since I served, and I've been just constantly involved in the community ever since. I've served on library board, museum board, YMCA, capital campaigns, hospital capital campaigns, education foundation. My dad taught me at a very young age that you don't just take from your community, that you give back, to those people that have invested in you, whether that's your business, whether that's your family, whether that's your church. You just give back. And that's what I've done here for the last 16 years. And I feel like now's the right time for this particular race, for somebody that wants to advocate for Ellis County and everything that makes it so special.
What one thing made you run? Because there's some things that really chap our, like, let's say immigration, and okay, the way this guy responded to immigration, I'm gonna run. So what was it that really got you where you said, I'm gonna do this?
Yeah. And so I had the paperwork filled out last time, this time 2 years ago, and just wasn't quite ready from the standpoint of being a dad and a husband, of what that was going to take for my family. The kids were just a little bit too small. We spent about 6 months talking about it. And really, it was when I had heard that our local elected officials, city council, school board, DA, sheriff, those kind of folks didn't feel they had an appropriate relationship with our current state rep. And so I've been on boards, I've been on councils, I've been on different initiatives to try to move the needle forward for Ellis County for 16 years. And we need that person in the single seat that we have in the Texas House to be an advocate for those people. I've always said this, and we'll probably get into it, but I believe strongly that local government is the most important form of government. Those men and women that serve on councils and our trustees and commissioners, they're belly to belly with their constituents on a daily basis. And they deal with those things like roads and schools and infrastructure and growth and how we're going to handle this. And they set the tax rates. And so I believe those people have the most important job when it comes to government. And for them not to feel they had the appropriate advocate in the Texas House that they could have an open dialogue with, and that person would go to fight for the causes that they think impacts their constituents on a daily basis. That's what absolutely, it was your show. I mean, it was on your show that I really decided that I just wanted to give him a run. To have that important of a seat go unopposed for a cycle, to me, should never happen. You should always have to defend your stance. And it's a quick turnaround in the state house. It's a 2-year election cycle. And so as soon as you get back from your session, you're running for office. And I just feel like if that person's not actively telling people what he's doing, why he's voting certain different ways, then you have to challenge somebody and make them kind of answer for their record. And so I feel called. This is not, you talked about the ugliness of it. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's not for those that, you need a strong stomach. And so I just felt too strongly about that advocacy level of those local municipalities being able to have representation in all.
There's You were mentioning the bad stuff. Online has been a jungle. And, unfortunately, because of the show, I kind of have to be there in that space.
Sure.
And that's just part of what I do. But, you know, you've been called many names, and you've been called a rhino. You've been that you're a liberal opponent. There's been a lot of names and stuff sent to you. So I kind of want you to go ahead and address that.
Yeah, appreciate it. So we've taken a stance. If you want a social media state rep, we have one. Like, that's pure and simple. That's the angle he's decided to take, was to communicate through social media. I'm old school. My dad was that way, belly to belly type stuff. Like, I've met people that have commented negatively about me, called me a lot of those names that you just said, and I've reached out to them and said, "Would you meet for coffee?" And when we leave that, if we're not hugging, we're shaking hands and we're saying, "I appreciate your stance on XYZ issue. I can't wait to fight for you in the Texas House." And so it's those kind of things. Now, rhino has been a term that's been around for it seems like a 10-year period. I said this at the GOP meeting. I've got the most pure Republican voting record of anybody on the ballot for HD10. I've only ever voted in Republican primaries. I've got a long history of that. It's undisputed. And so to say that I'm not conservative, I think the definition of rhino right now in Ellis County is anybody that doesn't support the incumbent. And that's unfortunate. I've talked to a ton of people that grew up conservative, their parents were conservative, and they do everything in their daily lives to prove it. They believe in limited government. They don't want government in your way. And when it does have to come into your life, it needs to be efficient and responsible. And so that's what a Republican is to me. I believe strongly that I've shown that in everything that I've done. A lot of times, because of the public school stuff, I think that that's an easy target. And I'm happy to talk about that. I hope
we will. We
Yeah.
will.
I hope we spend some time talking about that. That's been an easy target, particularly locally, having served on the school board and been a huge advocate for public schools. That became an easy target. And so it's unfortunate that we go to name calling, but I go back to my voting record. I mean, it's pure. Everybody can pull it. It's public. I've shown it to people. I've never voted for a Democrat in my life, and I've only ever voted in Republican primaries. So to say that record doesn't belong on the Republican ticket, to me, it's a little bit disingenuous.
Well, I mean, it's been a little spicy. There was also things about stuff that you posted that were, against the border wall, and there was other things. And I kind of want you to air that out. Like,
Yeah.
just put that out there, because there were social media posts. You can't
Sure.
hide from those.
Right. And some of those are almost aged as old as my youngest child, about 10 years old. And we'll talk border first. When I made that comment, I started teaching financial literacy in schools. And one of the things that I show them every time we go into a school is where the current national debt is. And at that point, in roughly 2016, I think it was approaching or had just gone over $20 trillion of U.S. national debt. And so my frustration with the idea of the wall at that time, and granted, this is one of those things. This was pre 4 years of Biden, just absolute open border disaster. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think that we should use every tool in the belt to be able to stop that. I don't think anybody should come across any border in the United States illegally, period. I think with technology and a lot of those things that have now come since 2016 when that post was made are cheaper options. And so are there places on the border where there should be a wall? Absolutely. And I think Governor Abbott, without the support of Biden for 20 to 2024, has done a great job at doing that. And then kind of to reinforce if we just enforce our laws on the border and on immigration, look what President Trump has been able to do in less than a year. I mean, our illegal border crossings have gone down. I think I saw a number that was 98% decrease.
No, we're at zero net migration.
Yeah,
that's the first time.
Yeah, it's a huge number, and the quickest amount of time that it's taken to do that. And what was it? I didn't see a ton of construction on the wall, maybe, but it was enforcing the laws. And so when you enforce the laws that are in place, one, you don't rack up your national deficit, which is now almost $40 trillion. So it's double where it was when I made that post in 2016. And so context is huge. Like, there's several posts, and there's a couple more I want to address if you'll allow me. Yeah, but context is huge. And when I've been able to explain to people, 10 years ago, prior to open borders, this is my stance on it, that we just could not go down the road of just adding to the deficit at all costs. That's where I was on the border wall. And Trump's been able to make a drastic change in a 12-month period, using technology, using a lot of different tools, but mainly using the laws that are in place. That if you're here illegally, certainly if you're committing crimes, if you're doing those sorts of things, you go back. And when he stands on his word, look what's happened. There's a couple others. I don't know if you have specifics. I'll let you ask specifics if you have any.
Actually, that was the only kind of social media post I was going to cover, but you're welcome to this show is so candidates could talk to the people. So
Right.
if you want to go ahead and address those things, go ahead.
Yeah. And there's been some comments on, public school, Matt's against, school choice or things like that. And I'm undeniably a public school advocate. You've known me for
We've
4 or
talked
5.
about
Yeah, we talked about it in detail. And so when the voucher fight was going on, I was pro public school, anti-voucher at the time. I was not the sitting state rep when that bill got passed. And so that bill is passed. I respect that bill and the people that passed it. I would like to see some accountability changes between the private and the public system. A public system will always take every child that shows up. Special education has nearly doubled in the last 10 years as far as percentage of enrollment. And yet the state has not come near that amount as far as the funding that we get. And so we talk about teacher raises a lot. One of the most significant changes you could make in public education is to decrease unfunded mandates. Security on campuses has been a huge thing in the last 4 or 5 years, where the state has said you've got to hire this many security guards for a campus, you've got to have this many armed guards or some sort of program to keep our children safe, which I 1000% agree with. We never want to put our kids in danger. However, the dollars didn't follow that mandate. And so the fraction, I think they funded 20% of the security initiatives that they passed a session ago. And so it's those kind of things. It's like you wonder why these schools, and we have several in our county that are facing deficit budgets, it's because all of these laws get pushed down from Austin without the necessary dollars behind them to be able to do that. So they have to pull out of their classroom budgets to be able to meet those demands. And I think special education is one where in my opinion, I think 100% of the funding for that should come from the state. Security, 100% of the funding of that should come from the state. We should not be demanding certain things on teachers, aides. When you push down unfunded mandates, we hear a lot of pushback about kind of administrative bloat in the public school system. Like you got way too many administrators. These admin buildings are too full. Well, that's because they've got to check the boxes on all these unfunded mandates that get pushed down. And discipline, security, and special education are probably the top 3, if I had to guess, that where the dollars do not follow the mandate. And so I think you could do a huge positive thing for public schools and public education in general if you just cut back on these unfunded mandates and say, hey, let's consider making sure the funding follows the law that we're passing.
So you don't think school choice should, you don't think that's a good thing?
I'm not against school choice at all. I think parents should have the choice to do it. I think in Waxahachie ISD, when I was on the board, we tried to create choice within the public school system. We started a STEAM academy. We started 2 dual language academies. Now we have a biomedical sciences academy, and we have an early college STEM high school in Global High School. And I think that should be the model. Create choice for parents within the public school system. What I worry about, and I'm okay if you're in, I think a lot of times a broad paintbrush gets painted across Ellis County and a lot of these more rural counties for some of the social ills that happen in Austin and San Antonio and Harris County with Houston, some of those areas. And so a lot of those things, if we're going to take public tax dollars and shift them to a private system, should they have to take every kid that applies? Should they have to keep a kid that has discipline issues? Should they have to meet the kids of a special needs situation, right? Should they have to have a publicly elected board? Those are the accountability issues that I would like to see. And I'm hopeful that as we get past this first kind of experimental cycle of the voucher program, that you start to see the accountability measures come play. STAR test is a huge thing. I think there should be some accountability standard for public dollars. We need to know as taxpayers if our money is being used wisely and if it's truly moving the needle on academic performance. But if one system, public, takes a STAR test, one system, private, doesn't, how are you ever going to know which system is benefiting? And so my concern is now that there's public funds in the private system, will the accountability measures start to kind of add up to be able to create a true apples to apples comparison?
And if you were elected, is that something that you're going to fight for in those mandates?
Absolutely. I'm not running for office to repeal school choice. Let's be clear. That was a governor and a lot of state reps passed that. That bill. It was a fight for a long time, 6 or 10 years of a fight over a voucher program. I'm not going in there to absolutely try to reverse that. What I would try to do is to add accountability standards with those private funds or public funds in a private system, or bring down some of those unfunded mandates on the public side so that our teachers can do what they went to school to do, which is teach math, science, reading, and writing, history, those basic core components that when you talk to a teacher now, they're lucky to get through the day to be able to do their curriculum. And then when they get home, they start having to do all the paperwork and check the boxes. I've seen my wife do it for 16 years, where she goes into every classroom every day, sees every kid. And then at 9 o'clock when our kids go, the laptop comes out. And that's when she's doing the paperwork. She's doing all the assessments. She's doing, it's a 14 to 16 hour a day job. And our teachers aren't getting paid for it. And we need to be able to take those unfunded mandates so that they can get back to the basics and do what they love to do, which is move the needle and create the next doctors, lawyers, law enforcement officers, accountants, manufacturers, all of those sorts of jobs that we're going to need in the next decade.
Do you support trades education?
Absolutely. You know where I'm at on this. When we designed that high school in 2014, we put 80,000 square feet to career and technical education. I haven't seen the exact numbers for the new high school that's going up in Waxahachie. I know Midlothian and so many schools around the district. Palmer is a great example. Ennis does a great job. And I know I don't want to start naming all of them because I'll forget. But in Ellis County, we do an amazing job of training young people, men and women, in those professions that there's going to be a huge empty bucket in the next 5 or 10 years. I read something that the average age of a tradesperson is approaching 55, 60 years old. And so in 5 years, that person is now eligible for Social Security. Are we training people to take their jobs and to be able to fill those roles? In Ellis County, I'm proud to say we are. I've seen it hands-on. We have amazing, amazing CTE programs. We've got TSTC in Red Oak, which is a great pipeline. We've got a campus in Waco. I hope we can continue to grow that TSTC and those technical schools in counties just like ours, where because of the cost of college now is $150,000 for a 4-year degree, you could send somebody, and sometimes the employer will pay for it for 15, 20, 30,000 bucks for a semester, 2 semesters, or a year or two, and be able to get that person career ready before they're 20 years old, to where average income could be 60, 70,000 bucks in some of these cases for a kid that's not having to come out after 4 years with significant college loan debt.
And I'm a big believer in that, definitely, because
I'm proud of Ellis County. I mean, they've been doing it for a lot longer than I got here, but that is something we can hang our hat on in Ellis County, that we are training the next generation for those professions.
I did get to see that one in Waxahachie. It was wonderful. Yeah. They're doing some major things. But let's switch over to something that's really also really affecting the people. Yeah. And that's property taxes. And that's a discussion we have every single year about.
It's happened we moved in 2010, and the legislature's been talking about it ever since.
And so what is your stance on property taxes? The incumbent would like to see them abolished and think that it's theft. What is your opinion on it?
Yeah. And to be fair, I would like to see them abolished too. I'm a little bit more pragmatic, and show me how you get there. I think there's ways. I think there's a couple tools in the belt that you could kind of chip away at to get there. But for the incumbent to raise his magic wand and say, poof, $45 to $50 billion of M&O tax on the school side, which is what I really think they're trying to eliminate, is for the state to be able to take the lion's share of that rather than the property owner. It's just, I need a plan to see it. I'm a CPA, I'm a business-minded guy, accounting, finance major. I would love to see them gone. My property tax bill has gone up in dramatic increments over the last 5 or 6 years. And I would love for us to see a way of, is there a way to cap those things? Is a person living in an $800,000 house using that much more of those services than somebody living in a $250,000 or $300,000 house? Is there a number we can get to that makes sense where those services can still be provided? When I think of property taxes, and I've tried to answer this, and you're right on asking this. I've heard it at every door I've knocked on. People, I'm in the mortgage business. The escrow portion of mortgage payments is now exceeding the principal and interest to pay that loan back over time. We've seen a lot of hard times in the mortgage business the last 3 years because of the interest rates. Taxes have gone up. Insurance has doubled in the last 3 or 4 years. We've all felt it on the escrow side of that mortgage payment. And so I would love to be able to see a thing where we can, a little bit prepare for those sorts of things. Is it, right now we've got a 10% bucket. Should that be caught up with inflation? Should it stay with inflation? Is there a point to where we could move the over 65 exemption to somewhere around over 50 or over 55, that as people are approaching paying off that mortgage, that now we're going to get them, another decade of being able to allow them to receive that relief before they're 65 years old and starting Social Security. And so I think there are tools in the belt to do it. I really don't. And as much as I would love to see them abolished, I just don't like when politicians say, yeah, we're going to abolish them without showing me a plan.
Well, you got when the constituents, when people look over at the last session and see that Texas had a historic surplus, you start thinking, man, people are suffering with property taxes and they're having a historic surplus. Something doesn't quite equal out. So what would you have liked to see done with that surplus?
Yeah, either a larger homestead exemption. And I know they did that for seniors, and I know a ton of seniors that I've talked to are grateful for that now $200,000 homestead exemption. That's a great way to be able to give those on fixed income relief. I totally disagree with the legislature sitting on $20 billion of our money. There's got to be a way to send that back to the taxpayer. It seems like the last 3 or 4 legislative sessions, they've kind of been putting the Band-Aid on by increasing the homestead exemption, originally around $40,000, now to around 100,000 or 140,000. And so that's great. It provides relief. It's helpful, but it's temporary. They have to vote to do that every 2 years when they decide to increase it. And we vote on those in the constitutional amendment election. And so anytime a government entity is sitting on a slush fund, this time upwards of $20 billion, that's a problem. So find a way to be able to do some of these things. I think my opponent has argued, and this is the only argument I've heard him make for how you fill that bucket of eliminating property tax, is changing it to a consumption tax. And I worry about that. There's a sliding scale that maybe makes sense, but Senator Betancourt, when Abbott and Patrick came out with their plans to eliminate the M&O, said that if you solely try to do that based on the consumption tax, the sales tax, you're going from 8.25% to 20+% on the sales tax, right? And so that's a huge, I may be able to swallow that. It's not going to be fun by any stretch, but at least it gives the consumer the ability to put the item back on the shelf or buy a cheaper version, right? But who it really, really hurts, and this is why I don't agree with my opponent when he says the consumption tax as the alternative, is those on a fixed income would be in a very, very tough situation where your sales tax now, more than doubles, almost triples, and everything that you buy, gas, groceries, whatever it may be, is now subject to that extremely high consumption tax. So is there sort of some happy medium where you say, hey, we only need taxpayers, the homestead exemption can come down to 50 or 55 years old. We're going to increase it from 140 to 200 for everybody, 200 to 250 for over 65. There's some way. Can we move sales tax from 6.25 up to 8.25 or 10? There's got to be some way to be able to do it to where we don't just keep going into legislative sessions with $20+ billion in the savings account. That's our money that we're not benefiting from, the interest on that by 1 penny.
How will you approach the budget when, they do budgets and they go through over there? How will you cast your vote? What would be behind that?
Right. And this is where I've had a little bit of frustration with the incumbent, is that for as much as he's talked about border security, property tax relief, funding schools and law enforcement, all those things, he hasn't voted for the budget a single time. And so there's been no dollars approved by the incumbent for any of those sorts of items. My approach to the budget would be you should not ever have to increase the budget by inflation plus growth. So if your growth rate is whatever, 2, 3, 4% for the state, and your inflation is 2, 3, 4%, your total budget dollars should never do that. I think one way to do that is if every time a bill is passed, you sunset 1 or 2 bills. Stop growing government by adding bills every single year. And we do have a sunset process in place. I don't think it's near aggressive enough that every time you increase legislation, which is going to be some sort of funding mechanism, that you decrease 1 or 2 pieces or combine or simplify other pieces of legislation to be able to adjust that budget. My budget, if I went up, I can't remember what the budget went up this year. Let's just use 20% as a number. If my budget went up 20% and my family dynamics didn't change, that's insane. I should not have to do that, especially coming out of the pandemic and inflation years where things were really, really tough, that you should be able to cut some of those things. But you should never outgrow your budget by what the growth of the population base is into the state in addition to inflation, in my opinion. That's the overall arching approach that I would take to the budget.
Will you be a proponent for law enforcement if you are elected?
Absolutely. My dad was 35 years. I remember I'd be home at 5 o'clock after baseball practice or later, and he would come in after a long day and he'd put his stuff down on the table. And one way that he kind of dealt with things and decompressing after each day is he would go and he would clean his boots. He would shine his boots. He'd sit down in front of the news or whatever was on the sports game, and he would shine his boots. I've met with law enforcement all around the county since I announced in May. I've sat down with chiefs of police. I've sat down with TMPA, which is the Municipal Police Officers Association in Austin, and saying, what do you guys need to keep our community safe? That's one of the main reasons that we chose Ellis County, because we feel safe. We've stayed here because we feel safe. Our police officers, our law enforcement, our sheriff's department, they do an amazing job with the resources that they have to keep our community safe. And I absolutely, that would be a priority of mine, is to make sure that those that put on the badge know that they've got an advocate in the Texas House.
Energy policy.
Yeah.
Because so we just finished having this ice thing, and I've been home. You know, a lot of people have been home, unable to get out their things, and I lost power for an hour.
Yeah.
Hour and change. So, you know, a lot of us went through the Freeze-Mageddon and whatever they call it. They have like a billion names for what happened in like 2021. What would you do to address that energy grid? What kind of legislation would you like to see?
Yeah. So this past session, the legislature, and I give them credit, I can't remember if it was House Bill 14 or 15, I'll get the number wrong, but I believe it was $350 million of an investment to start looking at, and eventually 5 years from now, start constructing nuclear energy sites, generation sites. And that word, sometimes you get freaked out because you think of days in the past where that was a scary term. But with the amount of energy use that we have in the state of Texas, and I'll give you an example. We know data centers are a huge thing on the north side of the county. We got them from Midlothian stretching across to Red Oak along Loop 9. And those things, and I'll be off a little bit on the numbers, but I don't think this is too much of an exaggeration. I heard a number that when all of those data centers are fully online, that little belt of data centers will consume between 15 and 20% of the entire state's energy need per day. That stretch of data centers. And so data centers are incredibly, they've decided that Ellis County is the place to put them. Red Oak and Midlothian have made huge investments in those data centers. I don't disagree with that, but the energy thing is real. I mean, we saw it in the Ice-Mageddon with ERCOT having an absolute failure to be able to provide the energy to keep residents safe, even though they're continuing to pay their electric and utility bills, right? And so I think during this one, it wasn't quite as bad, but it certainly was rough on several people. That we saw a little bit of an improvement in that. But I think absolutely I would commend the legislature. And I will point out, just because I'm going to do it, the incumbent voted against that nuclear energy policy. He voted against it. And those are things that, just because you want to be named the most conservative person in the House of Representatives doesn't mean that you can cast aside the need of 242,000 people in your district. And energy and infrastructure will be on the top 2 or 3 lists of the needs of our residents as we look across the next 10 years. 8th fastest growing county in the country. People are not going to stop coming here. And if we have people that do not have heat and cool air to be able to heat and cool their houses with the dramatic temperature changes that we see in Texas, that's a problem. So I commend the legislature for approving that. And I hope Ellis County, if elected, I will make sure that Ellis County is raising its hand saying we want to be one of the first sites for one of those generation plants.
In Austin, things get grimy, and there'll be situations where you'll have to vote for something like that's completely against your conscience. Talk to me on how you will approach things like that. When you have a vote that, okay, it has, like, let's say you were passionate about schools. It's got, $5 billion for schools, but it also does something else that, you're like, whoa. How are you going to approach that? Because that's what they do in Austin a lot. Yeah.
So they elect you to go and devote the needs of your district. And so I put out a graphic back I can't remember, sometime in the summer, where it was this visual of a round table. I think the difference between me and my opponent is that there's one seat at that table right now, and he knows what's best. He thinks he knows it all. I would surround myself with people that are experts in their fields from Ellis County. That's going to be people that represent the school sector, people that represent the municipality sector, people that represent law enforcement, taxpayers, people that are, working for a living, middle class, just taxpayers. And that when I go and cast a vote on the floor of the Texas House, you have plenty of time to research and to be able to get folks around you to be able to see, is my vote representing Ellis County. And that's the number one way I will look at any legislation proposed, to be able to say, can I walk away from this vote when that bell rings and know that I voted the needs of my district? That's my entire goal. That's why I'm running, is that I don't feel we have that approach now. Somebody that's willing to kind of isolate himself and stand on an island, even if it means the only person voting no, when that is not what your district needs. And so I would put the needs of my district first, and that would always be the priority in any vote that I ever make.
If you were elected at the end of your first term, what measurable outcomes should HD10 voters look for from you?
Yeah, somebody that's willing to go to work, and communication. Like, that was my biggest beef with the incumbent, is just I did not feel like, as somebody who's prided himself on the work I've done in our community, that I did not have an open line of communication. And I felt like I was the one kind of having to start that line of communication. I think constituent services is going to be a priority for me if elected as your state rep, so that we're always, whether that's town halls, forums, email communication, phone calls, making sure that our office always has somebody in it that is ready to answer the phone and to get back to you. My goal, and I've kind of envisioned this for the last 7 or 8 months, is that when you come into my office, whether that be at the Capitol or whether that be at my district office, you're in the driver's seat. Literally, you walk around the desk, sit in my seat, and you tell me what's going on. Now, are we going to agree on everything? Probably not, but I bet we agree on 90 or 95%. And I'm going to find a way to see if I can make your life better based on the legislation that I can propose in Austin. And so when you talk about measurables, I think it's going to be, are we being responsible with a budget? I want to see meaningful property tax relief. I'm tired of politicians talking about it just so they can get elected or talk about their opponent. I want to see meaningful tax relief. We've got $20+ billion in the fund. Let's stop socking it away. Texas has always said, they keep putting it in this slush fund because they're worried about a downturn in the economy where sales tax doesn't fund those sorts of things. Those are our dollars, and they should be returned back to us. They should not be in some savings account in the Texas House or in Austin. So those priorities are making sure that Ellis County feels represented, that they understand that there's a communication flow with their representative, and that I'm on a constant dialogue with those local municipalities to understand, what can I do in Austin to make you and your constituents' lives better on a daily basis.
I'm running out of time.
Sure.
We could talk forever on this, but I want to kind of hit you with some questions and just get as brief answer as you can.
Yeah.
But you are running in the Republican primary, so there's some social issues I'm going to go into. But
Sure.
The Second Amendment.
Strong supporter of it. My dad, I've been around guns. I'm a hunter. My wife's a hunter. My boys have been around guns. Now, we teach safety of guns. We're not reckless with them, but absolutely, we should have the right to bear arms. I strongly believe in that. My dad taught me how to handle a gun when I was 5 or 6 years old. I passed that on to my boys. My wife, like I said, we hunt as often as we can get. This campaign kept me away from the deer stand more than I would like, but absolutely a proponent and supporter of the Second Amendment.
Veterans.
Absolutely. One of my biggest regrets is not serving our country. I went to Texas A&M, where the Corps of Cadets is a massive unit on that campus. And I remember seeing them. They always sat on the front row. They were tired because they got up at 4 o'clock and ran. It is one of my biggest regrets not serving this country. I had 2 grandfathers that served in the Army and the Air Force. I absolutely admire those that are willing to put their life, including yourself, DV, their life on the line to serve our country. There is no greater honor to be able to go to, like, the Ellis County Veterans ceremony. And I get teary-eyed because these are folks that, especially when they kind of talk about the Vietnam vets that didn't get a warm welcome when they came home.
Yeah.
And when they have that crowd stand up and say, welcome home, I'm getting chill bumps just talking about it. We should always support those that are willing to say yes and to stand on the front line to protect the Constitution and to protect the rights that we take advantage of, frankly, on a daily basis.
The big hot top. Oh, abortion.
Yeah, not for it at all. I think the only case where I would make an exception is if the mother's life is in danger. I think if you've got a situation where the mother during pregnancy or during delivery has a situation where her life is in peril, then she should have the decision to decide what she wants to do. So I think educating our young people, I've seen the stats on what happens when a person that is, 1, not married, and 2, below 18 or 21 years old, what happens? It's almost a direct pipeline into poverty. And so we've got to do a better job, whether that's through education, whether that's through our churches, being able, like First Look in Waxahachie does an amazing job with education and intervention as a young potential mom is looking at that decision. And so, yeah, I'm absolutely for life, all of life, and would do everything I can legislatively to protect life.
Men and women's sports and locker rooms and women's locker rooms.
You know this one I get hammered on because I made a comment that if you look at the context, the legislature should pass those laws on day one. It should not go multiple sessions. It shouldn't take 4 or 5 years to keep a boy out of a girl's bathroom or a boy out of a girl's sport. Those are common sense issues. Like, absolutely, I don't support. There's two genders in this world, and I don't support one gender going into the bathroom or playing a sport of the other gender. It's obviously an unfair advantage in the sporting world. We've seen that happen all the way up to the level of the Olympics now. And we've got to stop with some of these social issues. There's no place for them. It's common sense. Ellis County wouldn't tolerate any of those sorts of things in our schools or in our municipalities. So absolutely would not be a supporter of either of those that you just mentioned.
One of the hot topics, Sharia law, because there was like the governor Stop Epic, there was suing on that. And some people feel that these Sharia courts and stuff are encroaching. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, there's no place for Sharia law in the United States. We have our law, we have our Constitution, and if you come here, you should be expected to abide by those laws, right? And so to me, that's one of those items that I just don't think that should have any place where we're at. And so I think a lot of times you hear that. I think the governor banned that in this last legislative session. And so Brian, I think, just asked for a special session to address it, but the governor already has a law banning it. So I don't know who's telling the truth or who's lying. But in my understanding, there's no place for that in Texas right now, and there should never be a place for Sharia law. We are a country of law and order, and if you're here, you should abide by those laws.
So I've come to the end. This is where I let you talk directly to the voters of Ellis County. Why you? And just go ahead and talk.
Yeah. Well, DB, I appreciate the time. I would do your show as often as you'd let me do it. It's fun. I love getting to talk because this is long form. And I think long form is one of the most powerful things. If you can't sit in a room face to face, this long form discussion is a powerful way to really work through some of these issues that a headline, a billboard, a mail piece just cannot possibly grasp the full context of those things. So I appreciate you doing this with every candidate. I watch your show when you have other candidates, my opponents. I watch it because I learned something from this, and I think it's powerful. I'm running because 16 years ago, my wife and I chose Ellis County to raise our family. This is a special place. I know you know it because you're not from here. I know it because I wasn't from here, but I know both of us got here as quick as God would let us get here. And I just absolutely appreciate Ellis County. I view the role of state representative as one that is an advocate for your district, one that takes things that are making pain points in people's lives, and you go advocate and try to propose legislation to remove those pain points from people's lives. Right now, we have a legislator, and you are a legislator. When you're elected state representative, you are a legislator. We only have one seat on the Texas House floor. We have one seat, and you're a legislature, which means you're a lawmaker. And so for a person to go 5 times with no laws passed, is a shame for Ellis County. And I want to put Ellis County back on the map when it comes to the Texas State House in Austin. And I hope that starting February 17th and ending on Election Day, March 3rd, that you will look at that second spot on the ballot and you'll cast it for Matt Authier.
Thanks again for coming on the show. Can you stick around real quick?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.